things. First of all, I mean, how did you get into the business? Yeah, North Carolina Business Magazine. I mean, that's got to be an interesting story by itself.
It is. It's interesting. So I graduated school, went to NC State to be a school teacher. Like my mother, I wanted to be an American history teacher, and went through everything up until I had to do my student teaching gig, and then got up at 6:30 in the morning one time, and after about 3 weeks of that, just student teaching, I was like, I don't think this is right for me.
I would love to have seen you in the farming business.
So I was also working part time because my dad worked. He was publisher of Business North Carolina magazine, and that was owned by the Daniels family that owned the News and Observer in Raleigh. So I got a job. I was working there in newspapers and education, which was trying to incorporate newspapers into the educational system in K through 12. And I actually went into the sales department for the NNO and got a job selling at first classified advertising, then moved over to display advertising. I enjoyed it. It was really fun to do. I enjoyed selling. And at the same time, an opening came up for the triad for a sales rep for Business North Carolina magazine. My father called up and said, "Hey, we've got a gig for you if you want it." And I never really thought about going back to the family business, but the fact of the matter was he was in Charlotte and the job was in Raleigh. So I thought the couple 100 miles of distance would be good, and it was. And so after that, I eventually came down to BNC, became general manager and then publisher, which I've been for since around 2003. As a matter of fact. So I kind of stumbled my way into it. I always kind of did it to kind of help my father out. He's no longer, he's no longer an owner of it. We are owned by another entity, but I am still publisher. And so it's very interesting. I look at this magazine, Business North Carolina, in many ways as a little brother. Little brother's about to turn 40 next year. But it was always, my sister and I joke, it was the brother, it was the child that my dad always loved the most. He kind of kept the other two of us by the wayside because he spent all his time on this magazine. But in doing so, the cool thing about the magazine is after 40 years, we still have a really good voice. I think we do a really good job of talking about the people, places, and businesses that make up this state's economy that changes so much. So we always have a story to tell every month, which is really fun to do.
Well, first of all, I grew up in a family business too, or a series of family business. So I certainly understand this notion of a little brother. And I also went to work for my father ultimately, and it was wonderful. Look, I mean, the lessons I learned, the mentoring that I received, I don't think I would have gotten in any other environment. But then my dad sold the business, and I said, "Well, that's a clever way to fire me."
I didn't get that. I should have done that. What happened?
And so you're still fighting the fight. I mean, that's
That's right. It's interesting. I mean, because it's the ultimate. They say it's not business, it's personal, right? From The Godfather. But
that's right.
it gets a little tough sometimes when something doesn't go right at work and you have to go home and have dinner.
No, I understand that completely. I really do.
The weirdest time I'll say, in terms of family business, is that in 2003, when I became general manager, the reason I became it's because we had a death of one of our key executives, our key employees at the magazine. It's very sudden. And I had to come down, and the board of directors told my dad, "You need to get Ben down here because he needs to take that spot, and get him, learned up, so to speak, in terms of what's going on there." And this is when I was living in Raleigh. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and I had to go down and live during the week down with my parents for the first 6 months. Before we could get our house set up and sold and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, my sister, who was in her 30s, was teaching at high school that my mom was teaching at, and was living at home. So you had a a couple, a 40-year-old, a 30-something-year-old living with their parents at home while they were also working at the same place of business with them. I can't tell you what kind of dinners we had during that time period.
Well, that's like immersion, right? You learn another language, you just completely engulf yourself in it.
That's right.
And I got that visual. I can absolutely see it, understand it. I haven't experienced it quite that way before, thank God. But
Tears of joy. Tears of
yeah,
joy.
no question about it. Well, look, one of the things about your job that I think I would find super cool, because I've just been an entrepreneur all my life, is looking at business trends, regions of the state, things that are happening. And so, what are you seeing out there? I call it growing trends in business, particularly maybe in Eastern North Carolina or the far West, or all over the state for that matter, and ultimately Rocky Mount.
So, good question, and you have to kind of look at it from two different time periods. One, you have to look at it pre-pandemic and current pandemic.
Right.
So, what I have, we're still talking to people. I do podcasts, as a matter of fact.
Right.
Kudos. Thank you so much for doing our podcast as well. That's coming up, I believe, tomorrow.
Awesome.
I know when this is taped anyway. I'll let people know about that. But so everyone that we have talked to over the course of the last 6 months has a two kind of phase answer to that. Whereas pre-pandemic and the majority of businesses that we talk to say, okay, pre-pandemic, we were booming up. We started off the first 3 months of 2020, the best 3 months we've ever had in our history. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from a variety of different companies. So if we're talking about there, you look after the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, things were slowly coming back. In the cities and the major metro areas, they came back quicker. During the course of those 5 years, right after that, the Charlottes, the Raleighs, the major metro areas, a little bit later in the triad, started really picking up. We're in that period. The latter of those 5 years is when you're starting to see that growth seep into other areas. And how I look at it into parts of Western North Carolina, some of the smaller metro areas, Rocky Mount, Greenville, and those places, you're just seeing it finally started to catch up. And a lot of those areas are really starting to pick things up. There was development happening, stuff's getting into the pipeline, deals are being signed, and it was really good. It was good to see. And it wasn't even like a poise for growth type thing. I mean, there was growth. You could actually see, bulldozers on the ground, you know what I mean, and scaffolds up and things like that. So it was happening, and it's still happening. I don't want to say it's not. I think what we're looking at now in terms of since the pandemic hit and everybody kind of hunkered down very hardcore the first month. After that, I think what I'm seeing from all businesses right now is we're all kind of still trying to feel our way. We're not treading water. I mean, no one's sinking or anything like that. There's varying degrees of success. There are some businesses out there right now, Mayor, that are booming. I mean, they are doing very well. There's a demand for their product. The biggest issue that some businesses are having is the supply chain isn't bringing enough materials to their factories, or they're having a hard time getting stuff out to the customer. That's a big issue. There's some other businesses, and if we're talking hospitality, we're talking restaurants, a few small businesses, venues, things like that, they're hurting. And it's just no getting around it. That's for sure. We have this weird combination that we didn't see in the Great Recession back then, whereas almost all businesses had it. And the reason is, there's still capital out there. There's cash. There's as long as the Fed start punching in so much money into our economy, there's still money to lend out and things like that. So that it's kind of the trend. It's not like really a pause. I think everybody's trying to catch their breath and see where we're going and get a little more. I think as we get to the end of the year, we'll see a little bit more of okay, here's what our plans are moving forward from that standpoint, which it's uneasy because business does not like uncertainty. But what I've been impressed with in terms of talking to folks is people aren't sitting by and taking it. And, they're really making plans to do different things if it calls for that. We are pivoting like crazy.
Sure. Well, it's funny. I think banks can tolerate more risk businesses can tolerate more risk than banks, which ultimately provide the capital for business that creates that opportunity. And one of the things I'm seeing that I think is interesting, and it's not just in Rocky Mount, but, well, I mean, Rocky Mount is a great example. 2 years ago, we had probably 600 houses for sale in the market. Today, I'm told anecdotally, we have 72 houses. And we're certainly not, a growth area in the sense of a Raleigh per se. But I'm seeing that all over the place, at the beach, in the mountains, in every city, that folks, because of COVID, I think are reinvesting in their home and considering that to be, a place that I'm really going to be domiciled in. And so I want the best and I want comfort associated with that. So, that's one of the things, like you've mentioned, that is certainly growing and certainly prospering. But what do you think these pivots are beginning to look like or will look like? I mean, what creative ideas are you seeing in the marketplace? I mean, obviously, things like PPE manufacturing, distribution, clearly are doing well. We've seen some issues early on with meat packing plants, et cetera. But, I mean, you're touching and talking to everybody out there. So what are you seeing those creative ideas the pivot may take us to, and, just looking at your crystal ball?
Well, there's some great examples across the state for sure. Really quickly, going back to the real estate market, it's white hot, and you are right. I mean, it's crazy. You put a house on the market, and talk about a seller's market, from that standpoint. And another aspect of what you were saying is in Charlotte, one of the funniest things in terms of this whole when the pandemic hit, try getting a below ground pool built in your backyard if you wanted one. Can you?
Wow.
I mean, these guys are booked solid in terms of that, which is very interesting. And I know that from we run another magazine called South Park, which is a lifestyle publication in Charlotte, and it's kind of high end real estate and things like that. And
Right.
so we're talking to a lot of those folks that are doing that. Those guys are busy as all get out, which is really interesting. Going back to pivoting. What we have seen is right when the pandemic hit, and this was really, I was very impressed with North Carolina in terms of the businesses, and as well as, boy, when challenge comes, and because we've had a lot, our whole state, and y'all in Rocky Mount too, we've had our challenges. We've had economic downturns, we've had industries that have had to shut down. So we're no stranger to that kind of those kind of headlines. So what do? We really adapted well at reacting to those type of things. So in terms of manufacturing, we have companies. There's a Mako Medical that makes PPP PPD that pivoted and really started doing some great work with testing in terms of making some tests. There is a great example is an awards company, and they're based in Raleigh, and the old plaques and awards that you would give at an event.
Right.
We don't have as many events as much anymore, so you imagine that their business probably felt that a little bit. But one of the great things is they still had that machinery to make plastics and coverings. So they pivoted, made face coverings, made barriers between workspaces and things like that. And they're still busy as all get out. So a lot of folks reacted to that. There's some great manufacturers in this state. And the great thing about how they look at things now is that they're like, okay, well, here's something that we can do, to do something different and start making face masks, start making these things. One of the interesting things that I thought of that I observed during that pivoting part of time is those folks didn't wait for someone to tell them to do that. A lot of folks just went ahead and did it at the businesses themselves. And one thing I've noticed, and this is just a trend going back to the business trend, businesses are doing a lot more these days without having some sort of a mandate from government or something like that. Businesses are starting to take the lead in a lot more things than just running their business. And
Right.
I have noticed that over the past 10 years, that it's been very interesting to observe.
One of the things I've found interesting as well, you're talking about, indigenous businesses or businesses already located here. I've had inquiries in the last 2 weeks, one from a company out of New York State, wanting to relocate to Rocky Mount, and another one from Oregon and Montana base. looking to move maybe not the entirety of their operation, but certainly a component of their operation here. And so I'm seeing a lot of inflow into the state as well, both in terms of people and as well as those potential jobs, which I find interesting considering that we're in the middle of a pandemic. You would think everybody would be hunkered down, but I'm still seeing that movement, and we're still got that general inflow, both as a state and in our community as a whole. I mean, how's that influencing what's going on in North Carolina? From your perspective, both from a business perspective and clearly politically, there's a constant shift going on in North Carolina. It has been probably for the last decade plus.
Well, a couple things is from a foundation standpoint, North Carolina has always been pro-business.
Sure.
Let's even regarding who's running it, it's always been a good place to do business. I think that and it keeps investing in that. So our university system, our community college system is, in my opinion, second to none. And we are constantly investing in those things. Y'all yourself with Nash and Edgecombe, both those community colleges, that is great to have those two institutions so close in one area like that as well, just doing some amazing things. But we also, it's the quality of life things. How many folks, like you said, from New York are moving down here for things that it used to not be an economic development, it wasn't on the forefront of folks with economic development. It used to be cheap power, land, taxes, things like that. Well, that's still very important. But now more things are coming into, more things are becoming a factor when you're looking into that. Good healthcare, good education, good schools, a good workforce, a good solid workforce is key. And of course, you always hear this every time, but this is Chamber of Commerce, great weather.
Well, that's true, though. It is true.
Look at that. People look at that like crazy. So those are factors that have been here for a long time. And those are factors that people are coming down here for. So we're going to get through this pandemic. This is a temporary thing. The fundamentals are still here, and that's kind of the key thing. Real quick, in terms of how good what we're doing, also from an economic development perspective. I don't know if this just came across the wire. I think the International Economic Development Council, which is an association. I think affiliated, I think with Site Selection Magazine or one or the other or something like that, just came out. Once again, North Carolina, third best state for business. Always, it seems like we're always in the top 5.
Right.
And our Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina was recognized as the top economic development group in the country.
That's fantastic.
Well, it just shows we have good people here that are doing some good things, and they're not backing down at all from bringing that business in. That's if you're trying to land a large business, that's long term. That's in a pipeline.
That's right.
They're not going to stop, looking at someplace because of this. They're thinking long term, and so are we. And I think we always have, and that's just been that's been a benefit for our state.
Sure. Well, so, with that said, just kind of easing on into it, of course, I'm the mayor of Rocky Mount. What would you advise me to do to help sell Rocky Mount based on all that you know? We certainly have all the things that you've talked about, or at least I believe we do. So, how would you distinguish yourself if you were us?
So a couple things. One is we've got, and I hope you mind the shameless plug, we've got a great report coming up on you guys, coming up in our November issue, which will be out in about 2 or 3 weeks in November. And but we talk a lot about what's going on right there, what new economic development, some of the research, some announcements that you guys have made, and what you guys are planning for the future. So, and it's all good, and it's been fun to watch what y'all have been doing over the past couple of years, because a couple things is, one is what we were talking about, these great workforce, good access to healthcare. So you have Nash, but in addition to that, you also have, it's connected with the UNC system, right? Sure. So perfect. And
over in Edgecombe County, we're connected with Vidant, so that's
absolutely
all part of the area.
So you got 2,
That's right.
And which is key. But here, the only thing I will say, and this doesn't go necessarily to y'all, but this is what I've seen across the state in terms of getting everybody together on one page. So everyone has to be going after the same goal, Everyone has to be working together. And by that, I mean chambers of commerce, EDCs, CVBs, city, government, county, all that stuff. If everybody is on the same page, working for one goal, you will be successful. And what I'm saying is because I've seen in the past at some other places that have struggled because it's been one group wants something, one group wants another thing, and they go after and they recruit. Sometimes they're going after recruiting the same person. It's all for the same goal.
Right.
If everybody, it's just everybody's on the same page and kind of has that one goal in mind of landing business or expanding the economy, that is the key, without a doubt. And success will follow from that standpoint, no problem. But from y'all's standpoint, in terms of the development, in terms of upgrading what you're doing in downtown and those things, is right up the alley. What I'm looking at, and this is just kind of, it's not based on anything, it's just kind of an observation, is it looks like, I think you're going to see more folks get away from the cities a little bit more, just because of everything. I mean, you're cramped up, and the COVID thing has people giving just a second look at that. That might be an opportunity. In addition to that is having a population of younger folks, obviously the millennials, and even younger than that, the Gen Zs and such. Now, you have to have that to survive. That's just the fact of life, from that standpoint. And then that also creates your small businesses, your entrepreneurs, and those things. But from based on what I've seen, you're doing that. You're bringing some folks in based on what your development is. And like I said, that kind of emphasizing on a creative place for people to gather, whether it be your downtown or workspaces and things like that. It looks like y'all are doing a pretty good job of addressing that.
Well, thank you for that. So here again, we're going to be reading about that and going to put a proud plug in for the article for the area so that we can all be looking for it when the time comes. But when is that going to be published?
You look for it to come out in, like I said, our November issue, which should be out around the beginning of November.
Great. Fantastic. All right. Now, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's just, like I said, it's been fun to watch you guys. And one of the great things about it is if we go back usually 1 or every 2 years to look at different regions, just to kind of revisit them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things of looking at your region is, and a positive thing about it is it keeps changing and changing in a good way. It's growing. There's different things, different announcements are being made. And that's something you guys can be proud of.
Well, thank you for that. All right, so I know that music is your thing, and when I was on your podcast, you asked me what I was listening to, and I see on your wall you got a mandolin and you've got a guitar.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to hear the story about those, and I want to hear about what you're listening to right now. And I know that you got a wide range, and you get it, so I just need you to narrow it down to, say, 30 minutes worth in the answer.
Start playing one, right? Yeah.
Right, sure.
So these two back here are actually, I have 2 more at home, and I have a Martin guitar at home, which I keep, and that's the one I play most of the time. And I also have an electric guitar, which I don't play as much, but it looks better on my wall.
Right.
So these two, I don't strum much on the mandolin much anymore. And the black guitar, I do it when the rest of the office leaves because I don't want them making fun of me and things like that. I've accumulated them many times and such, and started playing when I was 16, but I still only play open chords and very rarely sing along and such. But man, it's fun to play, and it's a great stress reliever without a doubt.
Sure.
And what I'm listening to these days, everything, as you mentioned, I have been listening to, I think we talked about this a little bit ago, but I update my Spotify pod list, just one long thing. And I think so what I updated the other day was a couple George Jones songs. And
very nice.
The king of country music, old school. My grandmother used to love listening to him, calling him that old possum. And he didn't write many of his songs. He wrote a few of them, but he sang every song like he lived it. And that is a very, very important and incredible thing in my view, that if you didn't write a song, but you sang it like you were living it, that is saying it. And George Jones epitomized that more than anyone I've ever, ever listened to in my life. So I've been listening to that quite a bit, but it's been cloudy too. When you listen to old George songs, sometimes you get a little down and depressed and stuff like that. So now the sun's out, so I'll probably listen to a little something else as well.
You got a little bandwidth to be able to listen to it now, is what you're saying. Well, Ben Kinney, thank you so much for being on and talking to us today. And hopefully I look forward to talking to you some more in the future.
It's been an honor, Your Honor.
Hello, I am Mo DeLoach, owner of Mo and D's, former professional basketball player and Rocky Mount native. Confirmed cases of COVID are still rising in our area. As a community, we have the ability to stop the increase. Together, we have the power to open up businesses, cheer at ball games, gather at celebrations, and welcome kids back to school. But only if we practice social distance, washing our hands often and wearing a mask in public. Thank you, One Rocky Mount.
Hi, this is Mayor Sandy Roberson. I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of the Mayor's Brief: Tharrington's Auto Works and Collision Center, Rocky Mount Radiator, and Davenport Auto Park. I am grateful to each of them for their support of this program.